today we are going to use square copper wire. This, you can't really see it, but it is 21 gauge. Here we will also be using a half round 21 gauge copper wire. The reason we like to use square wires are because they have flat sides and that lets them grab. We'll talk about that a bit more later. This is the stone we're going to wrap. The first thing we need to know is how far it is to go around the edge of our stone. So I am going to take my handy dandy. I realize this is not a measuring tape, but for the sake of this video for us, we are going to use masking tape, or in this case painter's tape, as a measuring tape. The first thing we need it for is just so we know how long to cut our wires. Before we can cut our wires, we have to know how big our stone is. And this allows you to use any stone that you have. It doesn't even have to be a proper cabochon shape. But there we have my tape coming around and matching at the top. From here, I'm going to actually just take it off of my stone. And if I'm working on the couch, I'll stick this right on my couch or on my pant leg or whatever. But this is the length. And it's actually from the short side here to go around my stone. So how long of a piece of wire do I need? Well, first I'm going to start out with my square wire. And I happen to have a ruler here. You might not be able to see the end of it. But I basically need 6 inches on one end of my tape, 6 inches on the other end of my tape, and the length of my tape. So that's basically the length of my tape plus an entire ruler worth of wire. So just to show you, my ruler length is here. I'm going to add my tape length on to here, and that's where I'm going to cut my wire. Now you actually need 3 pieces this length. So, whoops, sorry I bumped the camera. I am just going to cut 2 more pieces. I'm not worried about which side of my flush cutters I'm using. I'm just cutting the length right now. We are going to cut off all of these tails much later. We need to make sure we have enough wire to do what we need to do with them. So if you have any kinks or lumps in your wire, you do want to take your nylon jaw pliers and straighten your wire. To do that, you actually need a pair of grabbers as well. And I'm going to grab one end of my wire with my grabbers and then simply run my nylon jaw pliers down my wire. If you don't have a lot of hand strength, you might have to go more than once with your nylon jaw pliers. And you'll notice that I don't have a perfectly straight wire now that I've done that. It's still got a little bit of a curve in it. That's totally fine. What we want these nylon jaw pliers to do, oops, that's why you need grabbers, to get a good strong grip. What you actually want these nylon jaw pliers to do is to get all the lumps and bumps. So when you do run your fingers down your wire, you don't feel all these kinks and lumps in it. Like with a wire, like right here, I've got a bit of a kink, and right here, I've got a bit of a kink. That's what I want to get out with my nylon jaw pliers. Let me just grab onto that, straighten this last wire. There we go. So yay, I love my nylon jaw pliers. They are wonderful. Now I've got 3 straightened wires and they're all the right length. From here, I'm going to turn to my half round 21 gauge wire, and I'm going to just cut myself off a piece about 3 or 4 inches. If you want, you can measure this, but you know, it doesn't have to be exact. We just need enough. From here, the hardest thing that you're going to do is decide which side of this half round wire is round and which side is flat. It doesn't want to stay focused in the right spot. Take this other stuff away, see if I can get it to focus. If you think about it, you can see right here there's a shine. This is my flat side, and so my shine goes all the way across this side. If I flip it over to my half round side, the light plays across the dome of this, and you're only going to get a shine on part of this side as it reflects off of part of this half round. So once you have a little bit of practice, you are going to be able to do this a little more easily. But for now, you just have to, this is definitely my flat side, I can tell. I hope you guys can too in the video. There's the shine all the way across it. And when I find the shine here. It's only on about half of it, and I've got a dark shadow on this side. That's how I know that this is my half round side. Okay, so I'm looking at my flat side. Let's bring our square wires back in here. I've kind of got my ends somewhat lined up, but they're not perfect. I'm not super worried about that right now. I need to work with just one spot in the very middle, or close to the middle of my wires, and I want to make it so they're all sitting in a row and they all have flat sides sitting next to each other tightly. There, you can see that. So that's what I want it to look like. Now again, I've got my half round flat wire here. I'm looking at my flat side and I'm putting it underneath so that when I do this wrap around, the flat side is in the middle touching my square wires, and I can see my half round side here. Okay, so I've got one full wrap. It's actually crossing in the back here. From here, you need a pair of grabbers, and I'm actually going to grab right on top of that first wrap I made, and I'm going to use my grabbers, and I'm going to pull really tightly here and really tightly here, and I can actually feel underneath of my finger this little loop tightening up around my square wires, and so I have a really snug, secure first loop there. Okay, that's really important. Don't forget that step. Once that first loop is secure, I'm going to continue wrapping, and I'm pulling on these half round wires as I'm doing this. And let's do one more here. Okay, so now I've got this tail wrapped around the top and this tail wrapped around the top, so my last wrap is on the same side of my square wires. If I cut my tails off here, which I'll show you in a second, this is going to be the back side. I'm not going to see this side. I am going to see this side, which has 3 nice wraps. 3 wraps is not the only number of wraps. I like odd numbers of wraps. I recommend you do at least 3 wraps for security, but if you want to do 5 or 7 or 15, that's completely up to you and your design. Okay, but this is the side without any tails. So both these tails are coming out over here. This is the side we're going to see. So let's flip it over again. I'll show you how to cut these tails off. They're kind of going straight off of the edge here. I'm actually going to lift them up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but that allows me to get my cutters in just like this and just like this. And I'm using the edge of my wire to place my cutters so that when I put these ends down, theoretically, that one's a little long, I can feel it. That one's just a tiny bit long. I'm just going to cut a tiny bit more off of there so that when I lay it down, you want it to go across these 4 wires but not stick over the end. You don't want to be able to feel it when you rub your finger on the end. This one I can feel. It's also just a tiny bit too long. Cut just a tiny bit more off and bend that down. Now I can't feel that here. That's what I want with my wrap. So this is the inside, and this piece will slide. Notice I've been very careful to keep my square wires straight. I haven't been bending them. That's going to be one of your biggest challenges as you begin this. Yay, we've got our first wrap done. Now we actually need to create 2 more wraps, one on this side and one on this side. Actually, before we do that, we should lock this one down so that it doesn't slide anymore. Before you do that, you do want to check your ends, and if maybe one isn't perfectly centered, just pull on it a little bit so your ends are fairly close. They don't have to be perfect. Oops, that went too far again. All right, anyway, I'm pretty happy. My ends are pretty close. What I'm gonna do here is with I like my bull nose, but any grabbers will do. I'm going to bring it right over top of this, and I'm going to squeeze it really hard. Now what's happening here is that those flat sides are being squished down to the flat side of our square wire, and it actually grabs. After you do the squeeze, this does not slide anymore. That's how you know you've squeezed it hard enough. Okay, so now I'm ready to put a wrap, one here and one here. I like to make them match this one, but that's not written in stone. I'm going to cut 2 more pieces, about 3 to 4 inches of my half round wire. If you're afraid you're going to lose one of those pieces, just cut the one and then cut the other one later. Let's get this out of the way where the camera won't have trouble focusing on it. Okay, so again, my half round wire, I've got the flat side facing up and I put it behind my square wires and I do one complete wrap. Notice I'm working kind of in the middle of my half round wire. So I've got tails on both ends. When I've got that first wrap, don't forget this step, it's super important. Grab both tails. I'm bracing this so I don't put my square wires out of straight, so I'm not bending my square wires. Oops, there we go. So that's my first wrap. It's super tight, it can slide, that's what I want. Now I'm going to continue wrapping. And now you want this to match your first one. Oops, I'm sorry, I keep bumping the camera. There. Double check. On this side, I've got 3 here and 3 here. That's what I want. Both my tails are coming off of the back, so I'm going to flip it over, lift this up just a little bit so I can get my cutters in here real nice. Flip them over so I can get into this side. And then I can just fold them back down. All right, so this is my one that moves. I want this one that we've clamped down to stay in the middle, so because I'm right-handed, I'm actually just gonna flip this. I just flipped it in from end. I just can't keep that in the camera, I'm sorry. So now this is my lockdown one, and this is the one that slides, okay? Now I need to put my other one on this side. So grab my new piece of wire. Remember, check that you're looking at the flat side of your D wire or half round wire. Make your very first loop so they're crossing in the back just the once. And now I'm covering this because I don't want to bend my square wires unnecessarily. I'm grabbing with my grabbers and I'm giving it quite a hard pull so that this wrap gets tight. Now I'm ready to continue wrapping. Sometimes these need to be pushed closer together. If they don't get wrapped perfectly, that's totally fine. I think that's it there. Double check. I've got 3 wraps, 3 wraps, 3 wraps all on this side. And this side I've got both my tails. That's what I want. Lift those up. Cut them off. And then I just use my thumbnail to kind of poke those back down. There's a reason that I'm not putting these tails back down with my pliers, just my thumbnail, because I need this to be able to slide. Yay, we have 3 wraps. Congratulations, we have done a lot of what we need to capture our stone already. This is a base point. However, we need to know where our wraps are going to be. I want that bottom first wrap to be on the very bottom of my stone. This is the one that's locked down. And then the one on each side, I want one to be halfway up my stone here and halfway up my stone here. So how do we know how far along the wire these need to be positioned? I'm sorry, that's not in focus. There we go. How do we know where to put these? Well, we're going to go back to our measuring tape, okay? Let me just get this out of the way. I got a pen here. Let's see if we can get that to focus on the tape. There we go. So remember, the end of my tape was about here, or the end of my measurement. So all I am going to do is peel one side up. This is why I love painter's tape. You can do this and it doesn't leave any residue. Now while you got a fold there, I need to mark it, because that fold disappears if you don't mark it. That's my half point. That's the point that I want my middle wrap to go on. But my quarter points, I need to just do this and make another mark, and that's my quarter point. So there's been no measuring, or sorry, there's been no math, there's been no fractions, there's no anything weird like that. Let me just get rid of that. And then I need to put that about there, and this is my quarter point for the other side. So ta-da! Now you know why I call this a measuring tape, because we're actually going to use it to measure our wire. So I want this middle wrap to be centered on that middle point. And when I'm done, this one is going to be centered on this mark, and that's going to bring it halfway up my stone. However, I have to do something before this goes into its final position. I actually need to take these 3 wires in between here and separate them out so that they'll grab the front and the back of my stone. That might sound confusing. That's okay. Right now, I just want to show you how to do that. So, if you wanted to separate these square wires just like this with this much space in between, you'd have to get your pliers in here, you'd make tool marks from your pliers on these bends, and you'd have to really use a lot of strength to get that. So I've figured out a better way to do that. I am actually going to make this slide out, so I've got like almost a couple inches in here. And that extra space allows me to just get in with my fingers and separate out those wires a little bit. Okay? It's not like a crazy amount, it's just a little bit. From here, I'm centering those center wraps on my center mark. That's a lot of centers. I hope you could keep track of that. I've got a pair of round nose pliers here. This is a little bit awkward. I make it look easy, but I'm basically going to stick the tips of my round nose pliers in between those wires on my tape. And now I need to slide them over so they're halfway in between my marks. And now this is the awkward part. You have to actually open up your pliers, which is more than the spring is going to do for you. So that's made those open halfway in between these marks, but remember this needs to slide back to my marks. So I'm going to put my plier jaws on the outside of these square wires, kind of slide it in to my mark where I then squeeze them closed. Okay, so now from here, one thing you should never do is just push this wrap in. If you do that, these square wires could buckle and then you've got bends you have to take out. It's much better to pick this up, hold it on this side of your, okay, hold it on this side of your wrap and slide it up to that point. Okay, now let's see where we're at. It might not be perfect. That's okay. In fact, I find that this tends to sit on the outside of that line, but again, that's okay because I need to do some tweaking and I need to make these a little bit wider. So I'm going to bring, now I've got a space in here, so I can just bring these right in and just open that up a little more. And I'm going to use my stone as a gauge to know if that's wide enough. Those wings have to be wide enough to wrap far enough around the front and the back of my stone to hold it securely. I think that's good for this stone. Different stones are going to be different thicknesses and you'll need different amounts. Because I made this wider, it actually sucks this in a little bit more. It's almost there. It's not quite. I like to be a little bit of a perfectionist. I could leave it there. It will be just above the halfway mark on the side of my stone, or I can just squeeze that a little bit so that I can move that in just a little bit. There. This is the one side done. I need to do the other side now. So because I'm right-handed, I actually just flip this end for end, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So again, I'm going to slide this out a little bit. I'm going to pull these apart. Oop, there we go, a little bit. And then go back to my measuring tape. Again, I've got my round nose pliers in between those. I slide it over so it's halfway in between my marks, and I open that up. From here, I need to grab on the outside, right on top of my marks, and squeeze it in. There's a little bit of a big part here. That's okay, I'll just squeeze it in. Again, I pick it up and I slide this like that. You don't want to push these together because you'll buckle things. All right, so you can see they're not matching. That's totally normal at this point. I need to just come back in and widen this out. Something to keep in mind, you will never see this point and this point at the same time. This one will be on the front and this one will be on the back, or vice versa. You will, however, see this point and this point at the same time. So if you want things to be kind of matchy, it's more important that this point and this point match than this point and this point. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of that. While you're doing this, it really doesn't matter which side of the wire you have up because it can be reversible. Same on either side. However, when we do get to this next step on the stone, If you have like a labradorite, you might find that you get better flash with one way up than the other way, or moonstone is like that too. Sometimes you want to mount it this way. I mean, if you wanted to mount it even on a diagonal, that's completely up to you, but you need to decide on a very bottom point and a very top point for however you want this to mount. You can do any position you want, but you need to decide at this point how you want this to be mounted. Okay, I am going to grab one more piece of my painter's tape, and now we do need to take a look. This is the side with my cut ends. Can we get this to focus? There we go. This is the side with my cut ends. You can see them there. I'm going to stick the sticky side of my painter's tape across the good side. So my good side, my finished side is down, okay? And I can see all of my tails here. From here, I think I want it this way. I need to center the bottom of my stone on those center wraps and bring the tape up. Can I get it where you can see it this way? Bring the tape up the front and the back of my stone. Sorry, I don't have a ton of room here to show you this. I'm doing what I can. Let me straighten these. All right, there. Right in the center, right in the center. If this doesn't come out just right the first time, it's worth doing it again. Okay, so what you want is when your wires sit flat on the table, there's some focus, your stone sticks straight up from the table. You also want your tape to be stuck to the front and the back of the stone, but you do not want it wrapping around the sides or the edges. So I need to cut some of this off. I'm going to cut it off like this. Oops. And like that to get rid of that stuff on the front. That's about the right amount on the front, and flip it over. Let me adjust this. There we go. And get rid of some of this on the back as well. All right, so that's looking a little better. The reason you want to be careful to do that is because we have to take this tape off after when our stone is wrapped, and if they're wrapped around the sides or the tape is sticking to itself somewhere, it's going to make that much harder. Okay, from here I hold on to the stone and I actually start to shape these wires, this whole unit. Oh, it's not sitting very flat for me here. Let's move it around a little to where I want it. There we go. I want to move these around the side, the edges of my stone. There we go. Straighten that out there. Okay. So at this point, you have one more opportunity to just take a look at the whole thing and decide if everything is looking okay. Are one of these too high or too low? One of these wraps, I feel like they are not perfect. This is going to be your opportunity to move them. That's a tough call. This one seems high and this one actually seems a little bit low. I think I'm actually going to move this up just a tiny little bit with my thumb to where I want it to be. That looks better. I'm just going to hold it there. And now I've got 3 wires on each side, and I'm going to move the front one to the front and the back one to the back. And by doing that, this is not going to slide any higher. Okay, and I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. Move the back one to the back and the front one to the front. FYI, I always call the domed side of my cabochon the front and the flat side the back, but you by no means have to only wear it that way. I always make mine pendants so they're reversible. Okay, let's look at the bottom here. Right now, this whole thing moves like this a whole bunch. That's completely normal for this point. There's some focus. What you want to do is look at where this middle wire is, and you want to center that middle wire on the edge of your stone. So something like that, and then all at once I fold, ooh, that didn't work out at all. I fold both of these wires over the front and the back of my stone, and I usually do it with one movement. All right, and now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing. Remember, adjust this so that your wire, your center wire, is in the position you want it. And when it is, you can push the front and the back down over the stone. I've got pretty hard, strong fingers, and I can just do that with my fingers. From here, you're going to find that the whole thing kind of flops around less and is actually starting to capture the bottom of your stone. Yes, you're going to fold these right around the tape, and the tape's going to get caught underneath of that. That's okay. Okay, don't worry about that. My sides are still about even. Hopefully you can see that. There you go. From here, I've got my center wires. So remember, the front ones are in the front, the back ones are in the back. I just want to deal with my center wire, and I want to shape it around the top of my stone. And you kind of just go up to the top and cross your top wires. So it's shaped just perfectly around the top of your stone, just that center wire. Okay. From here, this is kind of a tricky thing. You need to put a sharp bend in each of these wires so that you have two wires going straight up from the top of your stone, and you want them to sit next to each other. And the tricky thing is you want them to be centered. So I need to make a bend, and hopefully that's going to be close to where I want it. It might not be perfect, and that's okay. From here, I actually flip it over because I'm right-handed, and this way I can come at it the same way again. And I'm going to grab onto it just like that. You notice that the edge of my wires, the edge of my pliers, sorry, are about a wire's width away from the center of my other one. All right, let's put that bend in there and see what we have. That's actually not too bad. Don't expect to get these in exactly the right position the first time, especially the first few times you do this. That's just not going to happen. It's not a realistic expectation. That actually looks not too bad. You kind of just have to stand back and get a sense of it. There's a tiny little gap there, which is okay. That's going to keep everything tight. You don't want too much of a gap though, or this isn't going to sit where you want it to. It's going to get stuck in front or behind of your stone. I'll get that wrong in another video, and I'll show you how to adjust those corners if you need to. But in the meantime, we need to make more of these wings around this top corner. No, I'm jumping ahead of myself. First, we need to make the bail. We're not done dealing with these center wires. Let's make our bail. A little bit of quick review. When we did our closed loop, and we made our first closed loop, and then we put the bead on, and then before we made our second closed loop, we had to leave a little bit of a gap in order to have room to do our wraps at the end. Well, this is kind of the same idea, where we are going to put some wraps around this neck part of our pendant, below our bail to hold everything together. But we need to leave a little space for those wraps. So I've actually just grabbed with my pliers, and I've bent forward towards the front of my stone. From here, I've got my bail making pliers, and I'm going to grab on top of this bend. So maybe you can, if I drop it on you, there you go. Maybe you can see it like this. These wires still kind of bounce apart. That's pretty normal at this point. But I'm going to use this smaller size for my bail. And I'm going to take these wires and I'm going to wrap them around the top, around the back. I've got to separate these two back wires to get those in between. And from here, you kind of have to balance things a little bit. And where are my bent nose pliers? Here we go. I'm going to come in here and squish this together. There, that's what I want. You notice my bail making pliers were still in the bail to hold that shape. All right, so now I've got these two wires. They're a little crooked, that's okay. Let's just straighten them out. And I've just got my thumb on the back of the pendant to hold it. Cool. That's not looking too bad. Ideally, if you've done this just so, right now this little neck area is too wide and too thick because we've got four wires there. All right. Now we are ready to make our wings. Okay. It doesn't really matter if you start on the front or the back. I am going to start on the front here. I do like to hold the bale wire tails on the back of the stone. Those are a little crooked. Make sure they're lined up. There we go. That feels better. All right. And now I'm going to, it doesn't really matter which of these 4 spider legs we've got left that you start with, but I'm going to start with this one, and I fold it across my stone, and now I'm just going to use my thumb to kind of make a bend about the right spot. This does take practice. Now, I don't want this tail to go across my bale because then it'll cross and cross and cross, and it gets really lumpy really fast. So I'm bringing it to the same side of my bale. I'm going to kind of hold this little wing, and my thumb is still on those back bale wires. I bend this around my stone, and now I just want to, I'm pulling on this, but I want to wrap one full complete wrap around the very bottom of my neck. I made that look really easy. It's not. Let's do the other one. I'm going to do this guy here. Again, I bring it across my stone. I kind of just use my nail to make a bit of a bend. I do want them to look a little bit even. That takes practice. Now, I'm not as concerned about holding my bale wires because it's already been tied down, but I do need to hold on to this wing to bring this down around, oops, and wrap one full time just above the other wrap. Okay? Ta-da! The front is captured, but I've got 2 more wires in the back. So let's do these guys. Same thing. We bring this across our stone. Kind of want to make a bend with our nail. I've brought it to the same side of my bale. And some focus. Yay, focus. Okay. And I need to wrap around my bale just above the other tails. One more. Bring this one across our stone. Put a bend in it. Hold that tight to the stone. And then I'm wrapping it just above the others. So right now our neck looks really messy, and we've got all these wires kind of going all over the place. They don't look super pretty because of the way I have to grab them to get the pull that I need. But dun, da, 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 we've got all four wings on both the front and the back. At this point, our stone should be secure. Dun dun dun. That means we can take this tape off. So take a minute, get in there, see if you can peel these out from under your wires. They do come. And then once you get it started, you can usually just peel it off, kind of pull it out from underneath of these wires. Do the same thing here, and you'll be surprised at how easy this actually comes off if you're using painter's tape. Any other kind of tape isn't going to do that for you. All right, I'm just kind of reshaping things, using some force on my thumbs to press these back down to the stone. You do want to take a minute here and just take a look. If any of your wings aren't coming over your stone far enough, or if you think there's any weak spots where your stone is going to fall off, remember those spots, because we can address that later with our tails when we go to finish our tails. Another thing to be aware of is these 2 wires that were coming from our bale. If I push and pull on these really hard, I can still change the shape of this bale and potentially wreck the shape of that bale, or pull one and then one is smaller. If you need to pull on these, like say they got super kinked and maybe you needed to take your nylon jaw pliers down them, I would strongly recommend putting your shaping tool back into your bale, which should be not super hard. And then you can pull on these as hard as you need to, and it's not going to misshape your bale, okay? So just something to be aware of, that this is not written in stone until these tails are secured. So we basically have 6 tails here. Our stone is secure, congratulations. Everything else from this point forward is purely decorational and just for the sake of aesthetics. This is where I like to use my my open spirals a lot. Let's talk about some different ways to finish all these wire ends. This can be a really intimidating thing for a lot of newbies. This is the wire that's coming off the very top of my neck. I'm going to use this one to tuck inside of my bail. So I'm just going to wrap it around a little bit farther. I'm going to cut it off. It doesn't need a very long tail because my bail isn't very wide. And now, can you see that? There we go. And now I'm going to grab that tail and put it inside of my bail, and I kind of come in here and squeeze it. Oops. And then from this side, I'm sorry I keep shaking the camera, I have to push it down. There, completely hidden. That's the first one. I also like to, let's see, I'm going to use these two. These two are kind of my middle two, and they're going to basically cover all this mess on my neck, which leaves, actually no, I'm going to do these two, which leaves this one. And this is something you kind of just have to look at what you've got and see where these are coming out and what your possibilities are. After you see me do one or two of these, you'll hopefully be able to decide for yourself what you want to do with each tail. All right, so I've brought one of those down tightly. Can you see that? There you go. And I've brought it tightly next to my two bail wires. So I've got 3 wires now coming down the back of my stone to design with. I really like 3s. I find they're aesthetically pleasing. These 2 are on my neck, and they're actually going in the opposite direction, and they're touching each other, which is really important. And I'm going to do one more thing where I bring this over here and I squeeze it in. I'm kind of a little bit aggressive. I want this to be as tight and small as possible. All right, so now this one's coming off the bottom and this one's coming off the top. So this one I'm going to wrap around and go up and tuck it inside my bail. This one I'm going to wrap down, and I'm going to show you how to tuck it in down here. So what that looks like, this one's going up. I'm literally just going to wrap, sorry that's in the way, on top of all of this other, mess, and coil up until I've kind of covered everything up top. And I think that's good there. I'm going to cut that off and tuck that inside my bail. Right there. Knowing exactly where to cut it off just takes practice. Shove that inside my bail. And down. All right. So now this one's going in the opposite direction, so I need to wrap it in the opposite direction, and I'm kind of continuing on from where those other ones that are covering all my mess started. Even with this covering wrap, it still ends up a little bit uneven, and that's okay. We are not here to make perfect, flawless pieces. We are here to make original, one-of-a-kind, handmade pieces. All right, and I've actually started bringing it over the edge of my stone, but I am getting low on wire. Okay, how do I tuck this bottom wire up under all this wrap after I've done it? Well, I actually take another piece of my square wire, so the same wire that this is, and I need to start poking. I need to find where my best space is. There's not much space there. Ooh, I've got some space in there, I can tell. But what I'm doing is I'm shoving this up, I put my thumb up to it, and then I pull it out, and what's sticking out past my thumb will give me some indication of how much room I have underneath. So I kind of go around and I test all of the spots until I find the best spot, and that's subjective. I'm not really finding a good spot, actually. That's not enough. I kind of want to put it... That's not enough. How about in here? You don't need a lot of space, but you do need some. That's probably my best space there. So from there, I pull this tight, and I kind of do this, and that gives me an idea where to cut my wire off. So let me just do that about there. Okay, I've got a plan. Don't cut your wire until you have a plan. My plan is to tuck it in this space here, so I need to pull it and bend it, and then I kind of tuck it in. Now, because I've planned this out, theoretically, I have just the right amount of space for my tail. Why won't you focus? There, that's better. And now, this is where you start to get pliers slipping, and when your pliers slips across here, it's going to make a big gouge in all of these wires, and that looks really ugly. But I got that to tuck right in really nice. From here, I've got 3 wires. This one that's mangled I know is not my bail wire because that's why it's mangled. So I'm okay just to straighten it a little. There we go. Okay. Now when you're making your design on your back, on the back of your pendant here, I strongly recommend that, at least to start with, you try not to make a perfectly symmetrical shape, because chances are it's not going to become perfectly symmetrical. It's much better, at least when you get started, to intentionally do something asymmetrical, because it takes all the pressure off of making everything perfectly matchy-matchy. So if you do want to try symmetrical eventually, then you need to cut your wires at exactly the same length. But because I'm not, I am going to, through experience, I am going to just cut these off. All right, and you'll notice they're all different lengths so that I have an opportunity to do different things with them. This shortest one, I'm going to go to the right, and I start by making a P-loop. Make it really tight. Make sure that that's the end of your wire is butting into the side of your wire. From there, I can kind of make this look really easy. It takes practice. That's totally normal. I'm going to make, actually, you know what? I want this to attach up here to this one. So what I'm doing is I'm making spirals, and they're going to lie right next to one of my wings, because I'm going to sew that together with my half round wire, and that's going to keep this from getting pulled up the first time it's being worn and catching on your hair or your scarf or your clothes. None of that is any good. We don't want jewelry that wrecks stuff. That's no good. All right, so something like that. I'm going to attach this to this lower one, and now I've got one really long one left. I feel like it's just a bit too long. All right, and I'm going to spiral it this way. So it's still a bit long, but I think I can make that work. There we go. So that's the design that I'm going to have on the back. I think that's going to be okay. And these are all touching and sitting next to one of my wings, which is going to allow me to sew them down. So let's do that. I'm going to use my half round wire. Half round wire. And now let's do this guy here. I need to be looking at the flat side, so my half round side is away from me, and I am going to stick it underneath this wing and here, and just into there. Now the problem you're going to have at this point is, how do you get this point, the end of this tail, up where you need it to? Because if you just push it, it's going to end up underneath everything and you can't get at it. So what you actually want to do is put it under here, just to where you want it to poke up. And from here, I'm actually going to lift this wire away from the stone, which bends it a little bit, and then as I push it through, that tail pokes up right where I want it to. That trick alone will save you hours. I used to not like this sewing step very much, but the more I've done it, the easier it has become. Got that same bend in there. Make sure your wires don't cross when you go to put it through the second time. I'm going to grab my grabbers and pull. So now, same as when we were doing our wraps before, we want to brace our square wires so that we don't pull them out of shape. But once you have that one first wrap, you do want to pull them tight so that this first wrap is super tight. So when you go to continue doing your next wraps, everything's tight. You've got a chance of getting your next wraps tight. If this first wrap is not tight, you will never get your next wraps tight. All right, that's sticking through. Bend it up, push it through. There, it pops right up where I need it. Pull that. I always pull with my pliers. You just get more pulling action. I want my other wrap on this side, so I'm going to use my other tail and get that under there and pull that tight. All right, again, I like my 3 wraps. If you want to do more, or your design dictates like will just look better with more, you can do as many wraps as you want, but I recommend at least 3. From here, I'm going to get the tips of my flush cutters, and I'm going to put the tips up against the stone, and that is going to get you the closest cut. Notice that my wire is coming out from between my stone and my square wires. It's not coming over top of my square wires and I'm trying to cut it. Being pinched in between your stone and your square wires is going to go a long way to keeping these tight and secure. All right, if you do have a bit of a tail, sometimes you can grab onto it and fold it over until it's smooth and you can't feel any sharp edges. That one is secure. Let's do the last 2. Again, my half round wire. I need a few inches. All right, let's do this top one over here. I'm going to stick it underneath my wing. Sometimes it won't go and you actually have to get a nail under there. You know what? I'm going to reshape this wing since I'm here. I'm just going to squish. This is my bullnose pliers. So I've got them right in here and I'm just going to squish, and that moves that corner down a little bit. And I just want it to look a little closer to the other one. That already looks better. Okay, so I'm looking at the flat side of my half round wire. It's not going to go under that wing, so let me just lift that wing up just a tiny little bit. All right, I've got it under the wing, and then it's poking out where I want it to poke up, lift it away from the stone, and then as you pull it through, it's going to poke up right where you need it. And you have to go a second time under these wires to get your first loop. That really doesn't want to go. There it goes. There we go. It's enough to grab. And I'm bracing my square wires. I don't want to pull them out of shape by pulling these. I'm pulling these tails hard enough that these could get pulled out of shape. That's how I know I'm getting it tight enough. Let's do that. Sometimes these square wires will want to jump on top of each other and just flatten them out. This guy here. Come on, there it goes. I make this look easy. It takes a lot of practice before it becomes easy. That's totally normal. I've got my 3 wraps. I'm going to lift them just up off my stone a little bit. Get the tips of my cutters pointing against my stone, and that's going to get me the closest cut. Even then, though, you do want to come in and finish off any wire ends to smooth them out. Simply by rubbing your pliers over the top of them, they're going to smooth out. I got one more left to do on the bottom. All right. If you want, you can sew this to even more than one place. I think I'm just going to sew it to this side. So I'm looking at the flat side of my half round wire. Make sure you got it, flipped around correctly. There. Too far, too far. Okay. Now, let's do that a second time to get our first wrap, making sure nothing is crossing as you do this. Bracing your square wires so that everything stays where you put it. Now a couple more stitches. Maybe I'll go this way. That one doesn't want to go in there. There, that works better. And one more. Cool. cool. Dun, da, da, da. There we are. That is it. All right, there. I'm happy with that. Lift that up from the stone just a little bit so my cutters can get around it. Getting the insides of those spirals is always a little tougher to get a nice crisp cut on, but do the best you can. And make sure you always rub your finger over these to make sure you don't have any scratchy bits. The only thing I do from here is I often separate this out just a little bit. And that's it. That is your stone securely captured. It's not going anywhere. It's tight in the wrap. The only thing I would do to this before selling it is antique it, and that's going to come in a later module. So I hope you enjoyed that. I am going to put up a couple more of these videos with a couple of different shapes of stones and just give you a couple little troubleshooting tips for a couple of different spots. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching.